Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So Ewan McGregor was on Jimmy Kimmel the other night and he was asked for like the 100th time whether he would do an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, and he said, well yeah, I definitely would. I think it's really cool that McGregor is basically campaigning for a standalone movie. Obviously the royalties and merchandising will make him set for life, but he genuinely seems into the character, which is kind of great I think for the fans. As much as I love Harrison Ford, it always kind of sucked that he didn't want to do Han Solo anymore, and he let that emo kid stab him through the heart. Now, Disney has said that they will be doing a few more decades worth of films and other Star Wars content, so it'd kind of be stupid for them not to revisit Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's easily one of my top 5 favorite Jedis, and I'm sure most of you also have him on your list. And if we know anything about Disney, they're all about safe choices. An Obi-Wan movie is almost guaranteed to do well in the box office.
I have the high ground!
Even if Wes Anderson was directing it with sock puppet characters. I mean, people would get pissed, but, you know, we'd still go see it. So today, I want to go through 5 stories about Obi-Wan that I think would be pretty cool to see on the big screen. Some of these are based on existing canon and legend stories, and some of these other ones are kind of filling in the gaps between existing stories. One of the most recent canon additions about Obi-Wan follows what happens to him during his exile on Tatooine. What I like about this story is we get to see the character development that changes Obi-Wan Kenobi from the action-first Clone Wars general from Episode 3 to the wise sage he becomes in Episode 4. He discovers quickly that Tatooine is a cruel and lawless place, but he must practice self-restraint and look the other way. He needs to keep a low profile. His mission to protect Luke is too important to jeopardize. What's really cool about this story is it'll be interesting to see one of the most cool-headed and composed Jedi begin to falter and struggle. The challenges and battles he faces on Tatooine will be mostly internal conflicts within himself. The B story would cover his secondary mission of figuring out how to communicate with the Force spirit of Qui Gon Jinn so he too can learn how to become one with the Force. Or perhaps another B story would follow Anakin's own transformation to Darth Vader, which parallels Obi-Wan's story. Anakin faced many struggles and uncertainties after being bested by his master. In the early days when he first received his armor, he was quite clumsy and vulnerable. He had some trouble adjusting his fighting style to his new, more restricted body. But the one thing that kept on going was his obsession over finding his former master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. The sandy deserts of Tatooine, the moisture farm homesteads, and the raiders would undoubtedly give this film a Western vibe. The pacing would be slower and perhaps more deliberate as we follow Obi-Wan's exile. But interspliced in his story would be Vader's more action-packed sequences that document his early successes and failures in his hunt for the remaining Jedi. I think it would be interesting to see Anakin's internal struggles, especially when he's out of his suit and vulnerable. If you guys want to learn a little more about what Obi-Wan was doing on Tatooine during his exile, we did 2 videos, one legend and one canon. You guys can check them out. I'll link it in the description below. I love 2 things about the prequel trilogy era. One was Obi-Wan Kenobi and his relationship with Anakin. Obi-Wan was still a mere Padawan when he lost his own master and was given charge of Anakin. Because they were so close in age and Anakin was extremely potent in the Force, they were more like brothers at times than master and disciple. The second thing I loved was the clone troopers, whether it was Rex and Commander Cody or Omega Squadron and Cal Skirata. So a perfect movie for me would be to see Anakin and Obi-Wan command the 501st or 202nd Battalions in battle. I'd like to see some battles and planets that weren't really covered in the Clone Wars series or in the movies. It would be interesting to see more of what life was like for the clones and their real relationship with the Jedi. I was always disappointed by how the movies and even the TV shows never really talked about the ethical dilemma that these Jedi faced when they were essentially commanding slave soldiers. Another thing that's interesting is like the similarities between these 2 groups of warriors. Both were raised without parents and also trained from birth to serve a purpose within the Republic. One of the most memorable storylines in Clone Wars was the relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Duchess Satine Kryze. We saw a vulnerable and even reckless side of Obi-Wan Kenobi that rarely appeared. We find out that when Obi-Wan Kenobi was just a Padawan under Qui Gon Jinn, the 2 Jedi had traveled to Mandalore to protect Satine from insurgents. They found themselves constantly on the run from bounty hunters and assassins. During these trying times, Satine and Obi-Wan grew close to one another and fell in love. Obi-Wan Kenobi famously told her that had she asked him at the time to lead the Jedi Order, he would have done it for her. This would be a story of forbidden love which was forged through hardship and shared danger. Now, Star Wars has tried to weave romance into its film narratives, but they never really had a strong impact or were well executed, and even occasionally they dabbled in incest. As a 10-year-old, watching Darth Maul spear Qui Gon Jinn through the torso was traumatizing, but unlike Obi-Wan, I had the pleasure of watching him return as a mentor and protector in the Taken series, as the patron saint of lost daughters. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan was filled with grief and left alone to take care of the demon child that is Anakin Skywalker. Something he had to do, as it was Qui Gon Jinn's last wish to him. I think the time period between Episode 1 and Episode 2 isn't really talked about a lot, so it could be a really interesting setting for a new film. We would see the early faltering steps of a far too young master and a far too old Jedi youngling. In the Legends book Rogue Planet, we see the young pair venture off into the unknown. Anakin had become restless, and training and studying on Coruscant didn't really suit his nature. Throughout the story, we begin to see how troubled Anakin really is. Beneath the surface, he has tons of emotions and power raging within him, something that he can barely control. Obi-Wan Kenobi also senses this raw power and begins to wonder to himself whether he's the right master for this Padawan. We know very little about Obi-Wan Kenobi's upbringing, but we do know he comes from a planet called Stu-Jon, which is actually named after Jon Stewart. Yeah, I don't know what George Lucas was thinking. But anyway, after being trained by Yoda initially, he was placed under the care of Qui Gon Jinn. Now, it's always been said that Qui Gon Jinn was a renegade Jedi. Many considered him too comfortable with what they perceived as the dark side of the Force, but I want to see what his teachings were really like. I'm under the impression that he understood the Force much better than his colleagues. He was, after all, the first Jedi in that era to become a Force spirit. It was also said Obi-Wan Kenobi was quite similar to Anakin when he was young, brash, hot-headed, and a gifted mechanic. It would be interesting to see how Qui Gon Jinn trains the young Padawan and sets him on the path to becoming one of the greatest Jedi the galaxy has ever seen. These standalone films give Star Wars an opportunity to look at new genres and explore the true depths of this wonderfully alive universe. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on all of our new content, and a special thanks to all you Patreon supporters out there who are helping us get through this ad boycott. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi, you guys are our only hope. If you guys want to learn more about Patreon, just click right here. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.